I bought a Canon Pro 1100 printer. I'm making a video just to have a little fun. I've had the printer only for a few days. Just going to summarize like why I bought it, some early impressions, some questions I have, and it's going to be a little bit random. So I'll start with, here's a print from it. It's the second print I made. It's an 11 by 14. It's Red River paper, one of their fine art natural 300 paper. And I'm in black and white mode. This was a shot I got with HP5 pushed to about 800. It's a 35 millimeter lens at 1.7. And yeah, I'm really happy with it. So just wanted to share an example of a print. Here's what the printer looks like. It looks like a printer. I used to have, or I still have, the Canon Pro 100. And it's pretty big and heavy, and it's just a 13-inch printer. This is my first time to have something bigger than a 13-inch printer. It's big, but it's not too big for me, right? I used my tape measure and I looked at the specs before I bought it, and I made sure that I had a place for this thing. And I have mine turned sideways so that it's easy to, right, for this thing to open up, right, the rear feeder, and then for the paper to come out, and for me to get to both sides. And so, yeah, but I measured it and I made sure that I had room for it and that it wasn't going to kind of crowd me out of my little office space. And it did fit. Yeah, maybe do that first if you're thinking about getting this thing. So, right, it took two of us to carry this thing up my stairs. I mean, I probably could have done it myself, but for back safety, I had my wife help me carry it. Now, one thing I didn't think about was how this thing was going to come in a gigantic box, and it's a good box. I love when you get something in a big box and it turns out that you're like, oh, this is a great box, right? My cats like this box. My kids like this box. They have turned it into a time machine, and they decorated it with flames and cut out holes, and definitely big enough for them both to get in there. And I got some great shots of them playing in it, and I can't wait that not only did I get a photo printer, but I got some great photos of my kids playing in this box. And it's big enough where like I might get inside this box. So yeah, I give so far a 10 out of 10 on this product based on the box alone. All right, moving beyond the box. Setup was very easy, right? I've owned printers before. I've owned 4 Canon Pro 100s. At one point, they used to like give those things away. The Canon would basically knock on your door and beg you to take them, right? Which just kind of, it's like, right? They're making money on the inks, right? It's not quite like that at the moment, but setup was easy, right? However, because I had turned mine sideways, I didn't see the USB port was on the... Are they going to show it to me? I have all these photos and none of the USB port. I thought I saw some. Let me check. Ah, okay, here a BH photo has one. So the USB port is on the side, and I didn't see it because that was the side that I stuck by the wall. And so I'm going through the setup instructions, and I'm afraid that it's only wireless. And so I pull out my phone and I open up my computer and I'm trying to go through the wireless setup options, and I'm not having luck after several attempts. Now, keep in mind that I was only a software tester for about 5 years, so I'm not the best in the world at figuring those things out, but I'm probably in the top 1%. And I was just starting to get frustrated that it didn't have a USB cord because it was not doing its correct wireless setup. But then I realized that it did have a USB port, and problem solved. From that point, it was easy. So yeah, setup was smooth and quick. It had me run like its first initialization test page, which took about 25 minutes, and then it was ready to go. So I went into like my Capture One program, just like I was going to make a print off my old Canon, and opened up the printer dialogues, and it didn't have the actual driver installed. So I was like, okay, it didn't really tell me to do that, but of course I should go get the Canon driver. So I went and got the Canon driver. So you just go to their website, download the driver. And I also grabbed the manual because that didn't come in the box. And it sort of makes sense because the manual is 694 pages. And I don't mind having just the PDF version of that. But yeah. I would typically read a manual before I buy anything. Right, for a new product. Like, I'm the person who's going to read a manual, and sometimes I buy things and then I read the manual and I'm just like, I wish I'd read the manual before I bought this thing, right? I would have kind of known if I really wanted to buy this thing. And I don't know. I mean, I can't say I'm not saying if I had read the manual I wouldn't have bought this thing, but there's definitely some things in here that would have been nice to know, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Well, I mentioned it, so I'll just go into it. You can feed paper either in the top feeder, or there's like a manual feed tray where you got to do one sheet at a time, right? And that manual feed tray is for thicker papers that you don't want to bend as much as like a normal printer, right? It's like it gives you that bend as it goes around the corner, right? And I just assumed that I was going to use the manual feed tray. I use a lot of thick art paper, but I was going to do it with 5x7, and I went and I stocked up on a bunch of fine art 5x7 paper. And the minimum size for that back tray is 8x10. And I was like, why? I can't do a 5x7 in the back? And then I read a bunch of other Canon manuals, and they're all like this. It's even the smaller 13-inch printers, the minimum size in the back tray is an 8x10. I didn't check Epson, but I do like a nice 5x7, and I like to use thick fine art paper. And so, but then it's like, we'll just use the top feed. Well, the top feed, if you look here at the paper weight limit on the top feed, specialty paper is up to 300 grams per square meter, which is mostly fine for me. But if you look at the thickness, that's actually pretty thin. And rules out I think all the paper that I was going to use. So using by thickness, I should be using the manual tray. So I'm just in this, I bought a bunch of paper thinking I was going to use it, and now I'm not in their guidelines. So then the question is, are these guidelines, or these recommendations, and what's going to happen if I ignore it? It says, well, it could jam the printer. And then also I know from experience and other places where I've read, you can get abrasion, right? And then even a little bit of ink can come out on the sort of on the edge or the corners of the paper that's not intended. Yeah, call it a paper abrasion, one form of abrasion. And so that's just, I'm going to have to experiment with sort of what the printer can really do versus maybe what they, right? I'm going to guess, as somebody who's worked in, right, large corporations and product spaces, not too different than this, that this is basically what they've tested, and can tell you is going to work. And then anything, if you go beyond this, like, it's a little bit like use at your own risk. So I'm going to have to find out. All right, a little bit more about why I bought this thing, other than just like an impulse buy. I've owned 4 Canon Pro 100s and mostly had really good experiences. Actually, from the Canon side of it, I had only good experiences with those printers. And that's over the course of, like, I don't know, almost 10 years. Yeah, 10 or plus years. The only time I sort of wasn't happy with it was when I started using NonCanon brand inks. And I was getting color fade crazy fast, much faster than I thought I would, even considering that they weren't OEM inks. And at that point, I was just like, okay, I'm not messing around with off-brand inks. Now these are dye printers, and I still have a ton of these prints all over my house, and I don't see any signs of fading or deterioration. Right, I'm mostly very happy with my dye prints. And I even put them in direct sun, etc. So I've personally never had any like concerns with dyes, but I am getting more interested in selling my prints, and I want that extra assurance that when I'm selling a fine art print, that it's a pigment ink and it's going to last longer. So I started shopping for like the Canon. Was it the Pro 300, right? The newest pigment 13-inch printer, and was about to pull the trigger on buying that when I started picking up on the clues that the 1100, the successor to the Canon 1000, was coming soon. And I just thought maybe I wait to see what that was. So now as soon as I saw it, I said, look, it goes up to 17 inches. I've got the room for it. Usually there's a little bit of, as long as you're running these things, you actually are saving a little bit of money per square inch when you buy a bigger printer. I haven't done the math on that. But then also they introduced, right, this is a different, this is the Pro, I don't know, I might get this wrong, Lucia 2 pigment inks, right? It's like sort of their newest and best. It also has an additional gray. So for monochrome, it's got black, matte black, 2 different grays, and the chroma optimizer. But for somebody who's mostly interested in using this as a black and white printer, right, throwing in an extra gray was sort of interesting to me. Okay, what else I want to say about why I bought this? Right, I am starting to care a lot about, right, papers, paper quality, the tones of paper, the feel of paper, right, and if, right, there are pro shops that probably carry the papers I'm interested in trying. But by the time you find that pro shop and right, and then you pay them to make a print for you and pay for shipping, right? This escalates. And I like the idea of, right, I want to sell people a print where I say, right, I've made this, I've touched this, I've approved of how this image looks. I put a lot of work into the image and the image quality and how it looks as an outputted photograph on paper. I'm that's me, right? That's not somebody else. I did it. And I think it's getting harder and harder these days to get people to look at photographs. Right, we all know everybody's on their phone, on their computers, on their TV, and right, I think right, getting somebody to look at that photograph, right, it is a beautiful print on nice paper, and it's autographed by the photographer. It's an editioned print. It's right, whatever it is, like I want as many things working in my favor as I can to make this a special thing that someone's actually going to enjoy. So yeah, that's my way of saying I didn't just want to outsource all my printing to somebody else. Right, why not Epson, right? If you just look at product reviews of Epson, like I'm talking about like on B&H, right, customer reviews, there's just always a line of people that are saying, hey, it worked great until it didn't. Right, it clogged this, or all of a sudden it's dead. And I've talked to some paper manufacturers that are like, yeah, people love Epsons, but like 10 to 20% of people who really use them run into like it just dies or clogs, and I just didn't want to go there. That I hear a lot about like, oh, Epson is like great for black and white. They have this advanced black and white software, and right, and then you look into sort of in the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a lot of like people who have customized software for operating the Epson and all these kind of like, right, if you're into carbon inks or whatever, right, it's a little more set up to work with Epsons. But my experience with the Canon Pro 100 is that it was awesome for black and white. I found zero limitation in getting that kind of output I wanted. And I feel like that's going to be the same is true for this Canon 1100, that I'm not handicapping myself. There might be a little bit of like, right, I'm going to have to, if I do want to get into like selenium or sepia or some sort of toning, right, eggplant, right, whatever, if I want to start adding a little bit of toning to my black and white prints, right, it's like, how am I going to do that? Am I going to, what software? Or I'm probably going to use Capture One. I'm probably going to be proofing with ICC profiles, and I'm probably just going to be printing like as a color print. Right, I don't think I'm going to want to run to like Epson's, software that's going to try to do it for me. Right, so I was fine to buy Canon. And then just like, right, the one thing I know about prints is it's hard to get like my family and my wife and my friends to look at photos online or a computer. They will some, but when I show people prints, like there's just that like wow factor or there's like an interest of, right, and it's obvious to me that people really do still enjoy prints. And there's been periods where I sort of don't print as much, and I feel like the people around me sort of, right, maybe don't enjoy me as a photographer as much, right? If they don't ever get to kind of enjoy, right, the products of it. I'm also very interested in trying to have a lot of prints around to start tossing around different combinations for book ideas. Yeah. And also, like, the more people see prints, the more it kind of helps the people around you realize that you are a photographer, which is just helpful. Like, it's helpful when you then have a camera in their presence, that they understand that you're a good photographer who might take a photo. And sometimes that just kind of eases a situation. of like, oh, maybe, hey, let's let Daniel take a picture, right? So, and then lastly, I thought about buying one of the last Epson printers, and right when I was about to do it, I realized that they didn't have replacement inks, and everybody was like, hey, where are the replacement inks? And it seems like Canon's already gotten ahead of that with, who knows? It's early. But yeah. Oh, I wanted to say one more thing about the setup. The one thing that did sort of terrify me is that I went to go. Is it not going to let me show you this? All right, I'm going to have to pause and figure out a way to share this. Yeah, let me do that. All right, I'm a little bit limited and lazy, but after the initial load of inks, right, I checked where the inks were at. They're all more than half gone. And the matte black is probably more than 2/3 gone. Okay, and they warn you about this, right? It's like they have to, the inks have to load the system, the lines, and so it's going to look like all your ink is gone. And but that's still like unsettling that, right? I don't know how many prints I'm going to get, but it already looks like I'm going to be needing to buy, at least matte black, like soon, right? This is not a good feeling, right? I wish that somehow, no, it's like these are gigantic arteries that these inks have to fill, right? And the inks are expensive, of course, right? That's how they really get you here and make their money. Not that it's not worth it, but right, replacement inks I think are $1,000. Right, each little container is like going to be $110 for my next matte black. Which, given what I just spent on this thing, is a little bit of like, no, thank you. All right, so the one other thing that I figured out when I was right back to sort of like paper sizes and limitations. Right, so the first print I made, right, I showed you my second print. That was the one I showed you. The first print was I was trying to make a 5x7, right? I wanted to start with something, right, small and safe and just kind of make a print. Right, and I ran into this problem. Let's see if I can actually recreate it for you here. Right, so let's just say this was the print I wanted to make. I'll show you the picture. Right. This is my family, right? Wife and kids. And, right, let's say I want to print this. And let's say I want to do a 5x7. So I'll go into my printer settings. Okay, and so I want a 5x7. So if I come to Fine Art, it doesn't have 5x7. So then I'll come to Photo 5x7. And the media type is matte. Really, I'd like to choose like a premium matte. It says top feed is not available for this. So it's got to be changed to manual feed. So I changed to manual feed, and 5x7, still I'm happy with this. It looks like it's going to work. But then it says you cannot print. You cannot print. Change to an 11x17. It's like, wait, I don't want 11x17. I want 5x7, right? And you get into this kind of vicious cycle of fighting against the system. And so it's trying to protect you from, right, working outside of their guidelines. There is a way if you want to say, sorry, Canon, just let me do it. So you come into page setup, print options, and it's called cancel the safety margin. Now it's going to tell you that you may get paper stains or deterioration or paper abrasion, right? It's warning you. But you can click OK, and then it takes away those guardrails and you can print what you want. When I did print what I wanted, I've only printed one. Right, I printed a 5x7 thick art paper out of the top feeder. It's 99.9% great. There is the tiniest little bits of sign on one corner of a little bit of black ink. I'm looking at it right now. It's barely noticeable. I mean, it's like the tiniest little bit, right? But it's something. It is something, right? That's what they're trying to protect me from. I mean, it's. I would be fine with that. If that's all it is, I'd be fine with it. If it gets worse than that, I'm gonna be bummed. Right? Um, yeah, and any type of kind of abrasion or collision in there is something I would like to avoid. So what I really wish is that they would just. I wish the printer would let me do a right. This is back to the same topic, right? To use the manual tray with a 5x7 fine art print, right? You can buy that paper, not from Canon, right? Canon is basically trying to steer you in the direction of using their paper. Right? Yeah, okay. But you should be able to, right? Fine art prints should be able to be a 5x7, right? I like sending people a really nice fine art grade 5x7. And apparently I'm going to have to be playing outside the parameters here. This is right. I think Canon, the 1000 was like their top of the line 17-inch printer for, I don't know, seemed like 7-10 years. So I would think the 1100 is gonna hold this slot for at least 5 years. So right, it's like buy it now, get on the early end of it. Another reason I bought it. So I'm 90% of what I'm gonna do is gonna be black and white, right? So I do. Right, flip to black and white mode, right? So if you just don't know how to do that, just very quickly here. Right, the color profile can be managed by the printer. And then you can just inside the preferences, you can choose a black and white photo print. And that's just going to assure you that you're not getting the color inks. I do wish, I'm going to play around some with like not letting the printer manage the color profile. And I feel like with my Canon Pro 100, I was able to choose a black and white print, but also do manage the profile myself. And just because I am sort of interested in kind of how the black point is managed. But I don't know. With black and white, it's probably fine to just do managed by the printer, black and white photo, right? But that's different than a toned image. So once I'm ready to start toning, I'm gonna have to manage the color profile with an ICC that I'm proofing. But and on that note, right? If you're somebody who uses right, NonCanon papers. I reached out to Red River, and they, Canon sent them the 1100 weeks in advance. They were almost done with their profiles, and they said they'd have them up in a week or two. But I checked yesterday, and they're not there yet. And I checked also some of the other big paper manufacturers, and their ICC profiles weren't out either. So it does just take. Canon in advance, right, gets printers out to these companies so they can start profiling, but we're still in that like brand new window where the profiles aren't quite ready, but that doesn't matter as much for black and white. So you can't let these things sit idle forever or they might clog, right? My die printers, my Canon 100, I would let those things sit for a year, and they would still work just fine. Never had a clog issue with any of the 4 that I owned. Why did I own 4? I mentioned because they were basically free, and I wanted to try different types of ink. Um, but it seemed like those things were never it was never going to clog. But with a pigment printer, it's right. I know that you got to run, you know, more prints through them periodically to keep them working. But I will say with my Canon 100, my inks would disappear, right? I would not use the printer for months, and then I'd come back and I would, all of a sudden my magenta would need replacing. And I'm like, 1, I only print black and white, and 2, I haven't been using this, so where did my magenta go? I don't know if they evaporate, right? I don't know if somehow these things, there's like a sponge that's like sucking the ink. I don't know. But I'm gonna be, I'm just a little nervous about like having to periodically run a print through these things. Hopefully I'm just printing enough, but because I mostly just print black and white, it's like, do I need to run a color print through these things to make sure that I'm keeping it from clogging? I just don't know. I have a ton of Red River papers. The 2 papers I'm mostly focused on right now are the Red River Natural Art, also their Paulo Duro soft gloss rag, and then Hanamule Bamboo. It's a little bit warmer, so I like papers that are either very neutral white or maybe a touch warm. So in preparation for getting the printer, I did order like, I don't know, 100 something samples of different papers, and went through all my old papers and photographs, and these were the 2 that I wanted to start with, or 3. That soft gloss rag, soft gloss rag, is also a really good one. Okay. Coming in for some final thoughts. I think I'm getting close to final thoughts. It is pretty quiet. It makes a little bit of noise. There is a quiet mode. I haven't tried it yet, so we'll see. I do, the optimist in me thinks I'll be making a lot of prints, and I'll want this thing to be quiet. But sort of this line of thinking of like, it's a pigment and it's archival and it's museum, right? It sort of leads me down this like long line of like, okay, well, do I want to use sprays, or what's the glaze? Is it glass? Is it acrylic? Is it museum grade? How much do I really care about longevity? And what am I going to tell customers about, right, care instructions? And it's a lot to learn, and I'm sorting through it and kind of figuring out what I want to do. Like, I sort of have a like, I don't want to spend a ton of money, right? It's like this. I don't want to promote that any more than is absolutely sort of necessary, right? I don't want to tell people, hey, you just bought a print from me, and now you gotta spend a lot of money, and or even it's, I don't know. It's like, what research is out there. I'm just trying to, it is a big ocean to swim in. And I am starting to figure it out, but it's like, right, it's just something maybe you don't anticipate when you just buy the thing, is how much there's kind of this whole other world that comes along with it. Right. Framing and matting and, yeah, it's yeah, and this is not my first rodeo, right? Most of it's just like reminding myself of things I've already learned in the past, right? I think we'll be interested to see where I end up with this, but I don't think I'm gonna go with sprays, and I'm mostly gonna go on the cheaper end of, right, for my own stuff, right, for my own house, right, of just sort of maybe UV protection, but right? Not museum grade stuff, et cetera, et cetera. Um, yeah, I'm trying to work on this like a book or a dummy book, and so I definitely got this thing so I can make, right, maybe letter sized or maybe 11 by 14 or 5 by, I don't know yet, but like, right, so I can start mixing and matching and making different piles of photos that I think can fit, kind of work together. And I know that that's sort of like most people that get to publish a photo book don't really have that much say, right? It's going to be more up to an editor, but it's still something I want to do. And then just like if you are sort of new to all this, like there's been a couple of good resources. This book, it's starting to get a little dated now. It's from 2017. There might be a better option out there now, but if not, right, here's fine art inkjet printing. Right, I don't know if these are right. I bought this back when it was in 2017, but it's a good book that runs you through, right, inkjet printing. There might be something better now. And then just like Red River Paper is, they have right in their resources section. There's a lot in there that's right teaching you and helping you, and even things like running through the cost of printing. So I've liked it as a resource. So okay. Just wrapping up here, final thoughts of, right, I'm excited to have this. I think back to when I first got my Canon Pro 100s and I made a ton of test prints, and I still have a lot of those, and I love them and I cherish them, and I often wish that I'd made more prints. And then I sort of had a lull where I stopped making as many prints, right? And now I'm going to be back at it. I hope, right? I think, sort of my vision here is that like I'm going to start working on a book. I'm going to start right making more prints for friends and family. I'm going to start making nice prints for my house. But also I hope that I can, right, I'm going to sell limited edition prints that I sign, that I've made, to people who want to buy my photography, right? And it's sort of a, I don't want to say it's ambitious, like it's or daunting. It's a little scary. I'm scared, right, that I've maybe invested in something that is going to be, once again in photography, another like expense that I sort of imagine that I'll somehow get my money out of it, right? So we'll just see. Who knows? But at the moment, it sort of feels like this kind of possibly something that can become a catalyst for some change in my life, right? And I think back to just how much I've been an obsessive hobbyist photographer for, I don't know, is it 30 years yet? And I would say 99% of my photos have only been seen by me and only on a computer screen. So, right, this is sort of a step in that direction of let's start getting more of my work out there and off of a screen, and hopefully, right, onto some really nice paper, and become like an art object that people enjoy and want. So, okay, take care.